Hello, we're going to be making this front-end single-page application in Android Studio. Take a screenshot or reference back to this when I mention it. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new project. So we're going to set it to empty activity and hit next. Now we'll get the chance to name it. So in this case, we're going to call it single page app. So this is just going to be the front end. There's not going to be any major functionality that happens, but effectively we will create what we saw earlier. So I'm just going to create a new directory here for this. These files will be available on GitHub. There should be a link down below in the description if you need to reference them. But for now, let's go ahead and create the project. Now, the project will take a while to generate. The Gradle just needs to sync and do everything. And in my case, I just need to get it to work with GitHub. But I will pick back up when that is finished building. Right, once it's done, it should look a little bit like this. The files have organized themselves and they look a little bit neater. We're going to be working primarily in this folder, which will be co.za dot whatever you set dot the name of the app. And from here, we can see if we hit this button over here, a render of what the app will look like. So it's just a basic app right now. Looking from the composable, we're going to be generating this greeting function that's going to pass the name and say hello. And in this case, the name is Android. If we change that, it will reference differently, but we're not going to be using any of this. This is just to show you it running. Now it always starts in quite a weird zoom, so if you just hit start interactive mode and end it, it'll zoom it in nicely. And there we go, we've got our greeting preview. That's effectively this code here. But now we're just going to minimize that, and whenever you're actually having the front end, you'll have to replace like this with the composables that we're going to work on. But for now, let's just delete everything, minimize that, and we're just going to work a little bit below here. So now as you build things, I'm just going to also comment this out so that the error goes away. Awesome. Now as you build things, there's going to be a lot of imports that are required. Most of the time it will show in red text, and we will just hit import for those things. But looking back at the reference image, we are going to start effectively with a parent div. This is going to be one major big block that's going to go over the whole screen. So because most of the content is from top to bottom, we will use a column for this. Awesome. So to start off, we're just going to write at composable, which is Jetpack's function for creating our views effectively. We're going to call this the details screen. As the reference kind of looks like as though you would click on a card and go into a more detailed screen of that. Now inside this detailed screen, we're going to be building all of the visuals, but for the time being, we're just going to open up these round brackets. Make it like that, and then inside here, we are going to just define our modifier. Now, this will help us reference the modifier whenever we need to change something, and then we don't have to declare it each time there's a case. We can just type in modifier, which is what we're going to be now using inside the composable. So, to start off, let's do the column I spoke of earlier. So now the column should show up as red, and that just means that we haven't yet imported it. Thankfully, if you just click on it, it'll show you a prompt that Android wants to import it. You can just hold and hit enter, or you can click on the prompt, and it gets added into the import. Here it is, and that's effectively going to be 99% of the red text we see are just going to be imports. So let's press on. To be able to see what we're doing as we're doing it, we're going to need a preview. But before we preview anything, let's actually have something inside this column so that it will become visible. So now we're going to use that modifier that I spoke of before, and we're going to say it's equal to modifier dot background, and in here we're going to say custom color 1. And don't worry, it won't do anything for now. We need to go add that custom color, and then we're just going to say fill max size. So fill max size is just going to make sure that the background color that we're seeing is going to take up the whole screen of the Android. But now we need to create this custom color. So let's head over to color, and we're going to go create our custom colors here. And a great way to start is we're just going to steal one of these and paste it and change it where we need to. So it's effectively just value followed by the name. In this case, we called it custom color 1. All of these start off with capitals, so I'm just keeping it consistent, starting with capital. And this is effectively a hex code, but in the start it's just a 0 by FF, which I imagine is just targeting the pixels. But now we get this great color picker. So if we open up our reference image, we can hit this color picker, we can hit the dropper, and I'm just going to actually click on the background of this image. And now we will have the correct color for the background. Let's head back over to the main activity, and we're just going to want to import this color again. Right? And now, although we can't see it, there is a screen with a block covering the whole screen that has that color. Now let's make sure we can see what we're doing. Now that that's done, we can go ahead and type in preview, and we need to set the show background to true. And then again, we're going to do another composable function, and we're going to call it our screen preview. So in this case, details screen. That's what we set above, and preview. Doesn't really matter what you name this, but it's nice to keep it consistent by calling it that. Inside the function, we're going to use the default theme that is inside Android Studio. This basically just makes sure that whenever you call this theme, if someone has their phone in light mode or dark mode, it'll just change appropriately. This is quite a long name to call every time we want that, so a simple thing to do would just be to rename this page theme or whatever suits your preference. So now, whenever we call this page theme, we're going to make sure that it always sets the user's app into whether or not they have light or dark mode enabled on their phone. Awesome. Now we're going to want to call the function, and we are going to want to import this. Cool. So what this has just done is allowed us to effectively preview this screen that we've got here. We've got some problems here. That's just because I changed the name. Sorry, let me fix that. And close that again. And the imports, it's just no longer getting that. If you don't know what I did there, I was effectively just changing the default name from the preview that we changed earlier and getting rid of the boilerplate where it belonged and in the imports. Alright, so now we have our screen. So this is because it's fill max size, we've effectively got the whole screen in view, and this is what the user will effectively see. Cool. Looking at the reference, we have a top bar that has a back button and a bookmark, and then the rest of the content. So we're just going to start there with that top bar. So in this fashion, we're going to go into our column. This is effectively our parent div. And we're just also going to include this comment right at the end there, just so we know where it starts and ends. Awesome. So now we know this is a vertical alignment, but looking at the little bar with the back button and the icon, I think it'll be best to arrange that horizontally. And for that, we will use row. Now row we will also need to just import, and it's the composable. There we go. And now we can add in the section. So the first thing we see is a little icon, and that icon is just the little back arrow. So we can actually just call icon, and if you hit tab or enter here, we will take in the default layout for an icon. And if we target icons.default.arrow, we get some nice arrows that are already built into Android Studio. So in this case, we want the arrow back. And then a content description, we can just essentially describe what this little icon will be. We can just say back arrow icon. Awesome. Now the problem with this, which we'll see when it renders, it's going to be quite difficult to see because by default the icon will render in as black, and on our dark background it's not very visible. So to change that, we're just going to type in a comma and tint, and then we can just simply define color dot white. And now we can see our little back. Awesome. So looking at the example image again, we've got padding effectively around the whole app. Now you can add the padding on the parent div, but doing so will leave a nasty white border around the back unless we wrap this parent div in another div that has the full max background color. So to avoid that, I'm just going to be adding padding on each element. That way, if we want to utilize the little bit of extra space, we can also do that. So let's just start off with this row. So for this row, if we want to change its padding, again, we need to type in a modifier is equal to modifier, and that's what we set the beginning of this composable, and we're using that over and over. We can just add in some padding, and let's go with a small 10 dp. So these all need to be imported. Oopsies, that was a misclick. Cool, and there we go. We see our arrows moved a little bit out of the very corner as the padding's taken place. Now just to make this a little neater, I'm going to put it back on the same line. And the reason I do this is whenever we want to shrink this, it tucks away quite neatly on one line there. Without that, as an example, it would close just that part and the rest of the row would stick out like this. So let's go and move that all onto one line. So now it tucks away neatly whenever we close this. But to not forget what this is, let's just add a comment and say this is the top back button and bookmark icon section. Cool. Now when we minimize, it's tucked away nicely, we can read what it is, and we don't have to worry too much about that once we close it. Cool. Now if we start working on the icon at the far side, we see there's like this orange color on the background. So to achieve that, we're just going to add in a box. So what this box will do is it is another element like row, column. It also needs to be imported. It just auto imported there because I hit tab. But now we're going to want to set it up. So let's give it that orange color, and we do that by again using modifier is equal to modifier dot background, and in here we can straight away type a color. So let's go custom color 2. Now again, we don't have this, so let's head back over to our color. I'm going to open up the image. We're just going to copy this whole line and change this to custom color 2. Go back to the picker, and just like the same, just like the first time, now we've got this background. Cool. Now we just need to import that. right now we're not seeing anything because there's no dimensions to this box, but the color has been set. Let's give it some dimensions. To do that, we can continue to target the modifier. We do this by adding another full stop. We can effectively keep on adding in more full stops and target more things. So in this case, we're going to target the height. Let's say it's about 40 dp. And we're also going to target the width and give that 40 dp as well. Right, now we have our nice little orange block. But we don't want a block, we want a circle. To change this, we can go within the brackets of the background, add a comma, and add in a shape which is equal to rounded corner shape. And inside here, we're just going to hit 50 without any specification, which changed it to percent. That allows the entire icon to seem round. Now before we continue with this and add in the other icon, we just want to create some space because right now everything's right on top of each other. While we're at it, we can also add in our text. So our text that says back. And let's just refresh that. And it, again, will be hard to see because the default color is black on the dark background. So let's go add in a color. Small c is equal to big C dot big W. Awesome. Now we can get back to that space in between them. To do this, we'll add in a spacer. Spacer is another thing that needs to be imported. And again, we're going to be using our good old friend modifier. Oops, modifier. Cool. And what the modifier is going to let us do is it's going to let us choose if we want a vertical space, we're going to use width. If we wanted a horizontal space, we'd obviously use height, and a padding would be space around everywhere. So for this case, let's just take up as much of the screen as we can to get it across the other side, which should be around 260 dp. Awesome. See, now we've got great space between these, and we can continue. Going inside the box, we want to create this little bookmark image. The problem is, even with the default icons, there is no real vector image for a bookmark. So instead, I've gone and gotten one, I've created one ahead of time. And here it is, it's our SVG. And what we're going to do is import this. So the easiest way to do is to head over to the resource manager, hit this plus, hit import drawable, and now it's going to want us to select it. So just like the file opened before, this is the location, and we want to add in our bookmark. And there it is, our bookmark. Like this, it is an image, and we can resize it and everything we would be able to do with an image. But in the case of this icon, I think it will be better to use the vector asset. And then we'll head back to images a little later on when we're getting the big planet. So I'm just going to navigate over to where I had those SVGs saved, in which case it's here, the bookmark, and just like that we have our bookmark. We're going to leave it as the default name of the file, hit next, it's going to be added into drawables, hit finish. So we can obviously see it here, but as well if we go into our files, we will be able to see it in our drawables, and there it is, the bookmark we've just added. Cool. So now how do we use this bookmark? Well, the easiest way would be to just define a value that is effectively targeting it. So let's say call it bookmark icon, and it will be equal to painter resource r.drawable, which is the file we saved it in, and its name was bookmark. Awesome. So now we have this value that's effectively just pointing to the SVG that we added into the files. Now to call this, we're just going to get an image, and we are going to, let's use the default layout, there we go, and we're going to call the painter is our bookmark icon, and then as a description we can just say bookmark icon. Awesome. Let's just refresh that. And once it loads, now we can see our little bookmark icon. It's a little bit off to the side, so we'll recenter that. The way we're going to do that is we're going to get back to our box, and we're just going to, above the modifier, we're going to type in content alignment is equal to alignment dot center. And now make sure this comma is included before the modifier, and we will see the icon is nice and centered. And that about does it. That about wraps up the top bar section. So now we can minimize it, and it tucks away nicely like that. Cool. So still inside the parent div, but below the row, we're going to now work on the little planet image. So in this case, it'll come right below the section that we've got at the top. Awesome. And for that, it is another image. But let's go ahead and import this image. And for this one, we're going to be just using the import drawables. And we are going to click on this planet earth global.png. So this works great for PNGs. We should also set the density to no density. I believe this helps with the rendering quality on different screens, but I'm not too quite sure. Going on, we are going to import this, and now this exists. So, just like before, when we did our value for the bookmark, we are going to create the value for this planet. So let's copy that line and just call this planet image. Awesome. And now it's still in the drawables, but we can just type its name in. And just like that, we can now create the image. So for the painter, it is planet image. And for the description, I'm just going to open up this row to check the content description. We are going to call it Earth image. Awesome. Let us refresh this and get it to build. And there we go. It's quite a nice size, pretty similar to what we're already needing from the wireframe, but it's awfully off-center. So to center this and make it work a bit nicely, we're going to go back into the parent div, the column, and we are going to set up a horizontal alignment, and it will be equal to align center horizontally. And there we go. Now all of our elements are center aligned onto the screen. Cool. Now that we've done this, the next section would be all of this info. So again, we're going to want to define a element to put these under. I think a column works best here, and we're going to break it up further as we need. And for this column, we are going to start with the top section, the name, planet, and the rating. But because these are aligned horizontally, even though we're within a column, we're going to open up a row straight away. So now this is going to help us when we need to create that section. To start things off, we are going to just create a text, and we're going to call it planet. Cool, we are going to call this planet, and let's go ahead and give it a color so we can see it on our terrible background, because it is always difficult to see. Lowercase c is equal to color dot white. Oh, no, dot white. Awesome, and now we can see it. But it's not exactly where we want it. It is center aligned as the main parent div is doing that, but we're going to want to arrange this a little bit differently. So there's two ways we can do this. We can either create a modifier inside the row that'll make it the max width and then align the content from the start, or the way that I'm going to use, we'll continue to put the content in this row and just put a spacer between them. So let's ignore where it is right now, add in our spacer, and we are going to use the modifier width, and let's set it to a 50 dp for now, which isn't going to be nearly enough, but it'll help us finish the content and we can resize after. So looking at the wireframe, this cluster of elements there looks to me like it could fit nicely into another column, because there are some elements on top of another element, and these will be siblings to the text planet. So let's add in our column, and inside the column, if we look again at this image, it looks like the star and the rating can fit nicely together in a row within the column. So here we're going to add in a row. So these are a lot of nested elements, but they're just going to help us align all the content and help us fill it out as we go. So let us create the things inside, which are now going to be the icon and the rating. So for this we can use the icon, and there's a nice default icon that we can use for the star, and there it is, and this will be the star icon. Cool. And it is still black right now, so we can't see it, and to change that we're just going to give it a tint, and the color we're going to use is going to be the same as the orange we created earlier. So let's just type in our custom color 2, I believe it was, and there we go, we can see our star. Right, now next to the star we have the actual rating, and for that we're just going to use a text, and we're going to give it its modest 4.8, even though it's clearly the best planet in the solar system, and we will give it a color of white so that we can see it. Awesome. Now underneath the rating we see we have 8 billion reviews. So that's not going to be in our row anymore. It's going to be inside the column above that. So these still all fit inside the other row, which is this entire piece here that has the spacer in the middle. So we need to effectively come out one layer, so we can add in that text of 8 billion reviews, and we'll give it a color again of white. White. I'm not sure why it does that. Cool. And there we go. But looking at the wireframes, this number and this text clearly aren't the same size. So we're going to want to make this a little bit smaller. And to do that, I'm just going to type in font size, and let's set it to 10 SP. SP needs to be imported. And there we go, it's a bit smaller. And now, to me, this text is probably just really small, but I think it looks a little nicer if we just change it to gray. Looks a lot more like the wireframe that way, just because of the size and the small little text under there. Cool. So now we have this top section, we can go back to the space that we spoke of and properly split them across the whole screen. So for that, let's just change the DP to around 240, and now we've got it across the whole screen. The difference is we just have the rating to the side, and over here it's on the left, there it's on the right, and that's a very easy fix. We're just going to head over to the column that it's in, which is here, and we're going to give it a horizontal alignment and an alignment of end, and that'll bump it over to the side, and now it looks much like the wireframe. Awesome. Now I'm just going to move this back into there so that it tucks away nicely if we need to ever minimize it, and that's what we're going to do now. So that's that section, quite nicely done, and we can tuck that away. So this is the top rating and planet section. Awesome. Now, we're still in the column that is responsible for all of the text underneath, and that's where we are when we are underneath this row. Here we are. So let's just call this text and details section. Now we can always keep track of where we are. Right, so the next thing we see on the wireframe is a big text saying the Earth. So let's include that here. The Earth. Almost feels like it needs an exclamation mark. Set its color to white. Awesome. And we're going to give it some font weight of bold. And we're going to bump up the font size to about 35 SP. Cool. That looks a lot more like the wireframe. Awesome. Moving on, we have the big blurb of text underneath, all of the information about the planet. So I'm going to quickly copy this from my example reference application. If you don't feel like typing it out, it will be in the description below, but it's effectively just this text here, so we can have it all underneath. Right now, it is black in color again, which makes it hard to see, but we're going to fix that now. Right. I don't know why I can't resize. Oh, there we go. Awesome. So now this little comma is right after the text, still inside the text element, but after the actual writing. This is where we can give it its color. Cool. Now we're able to see the text. And we can also change the line height. We're going to drop it all the way to 15 SP. That's going to squish the text nice and neatly to look a little bit more close to this. And what will really help round it out now is changing the font size to a modest 12 SP. Awesome. That's starting to look a lot like the wireframe. The only thing right now is the text is basically all squished on the side. And it doesn't look much like the wireframe, so we're going to add in some padding to avoid that. So let's head over back to our main column, and this is where we're going to do our modifier. Dot padding, and let's give it a padding of 10 dp. Just make sure you don't misspell modifier like I have. And what this is going to do is help pad out everything. As you can see, it's not squished onto the side so bad anymore. Cool. Now, right underneath this, we can actually bring this text bracket back over there and work on a little bit of space before we get into all of this content underneath here. Cool, so let's add in a spacer element, and this one is going to be a vertical spacer, which means we want to target the height, not the width like before. And let's give it a 10 dp space. We won't see that just yet because there's nothing underneath to show, but let's add in the next part. Cool. Looking at this wireframe, I think these two elements we can group together in one row. Remember, this is still under the main column that holds all of the info of the planet, but these two cards, these two tiles, they can fit in a row quite nicely. So let's add in that row. Awesome. So for this row, we're going to want to now add in one of these elements. And it looks like this little tile. So the way we can achieve that is we're going to again use a box. And this box is effectively going to make our tile. So for the first thing we need to do is target the modifier. And let's give it again a background of custom color 3. And before we go any further, let's just go ahead and define that color. We'll head back over to our colors. Going to grab this line, change that to a 3. Use the picker again to click on the little card. And now we have this color. Awesome. Heading over to the main activity again, we can now import it. And let's give it some dimensions so that we can see it. So let's add in a width of, let's say, 160 dp. And for now, we're going to add in a height, but we'll take that away later just so that it can auto size itself. Let's give it a height of, say, 20 dp. Cool. Box is not rendering. Let's see what's the problem here. This is just like the box we used earlier. Do is just grab this just to make sure nothing funny is happening, and we'll give modifiers to it. Take away its content for now. Not sure what's going on there, but now that we've added in this box, we can see our little box has appeared over there. So let's take away the height now and make it more closely aligned to what we're going to need from the wireframe. And for that, we're just going to need to round the corners out as well. So again, rounded corner shape. And this is going to be 12 dp. Awesome. And now we're going to add in some padding of, let's say, 10 dp. And this will allow us to see it and its shape. And once we add in the content, it'll look a little bit more like we can see in the wireframe. Awesome. So looking again at the wireframe, I feel like this could all be under one row, and this percentage and the H2O surface coverage here can be under its own column. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's add in a row. And inside this row, we want the column on the one side and the image on the other side, just underneath the column, still part of the row. Cool. Let's add in the content of the column, which is just some text. Here we're going to make it the 71%. It's a color white. Awesome. Once that renders, we can see what it looks like. We can also start adding in the next text, which goes underneath. That is the H2O surface coverage. Awesome. And this we also want to just change the color to white. Cool. So now we have that column sorted. Let's add in our image at the end, and then we will restyle this whole box. Cool. So this image, again, we don't have very nice icon defaults that will look like this droplet. So instead, I've gone and created another SVG that will do that for us, and I've titled it drop here. There it is. We can add that in. Let's add a value for it, much like we did for all of the other images so far. And this will be drop image, and let's just change this to dot drop. Awesome. So now we can call it drop image, and let's just give it a description of droplet icon. Cool. Let's let that all render out inside that box that we created, that little tile. Then we're going to restyle and resize and reshape some things just so that it looks a little neater. Okay, let's resize this image, this droplet, so we can see what's going on. Let's give it a size of 35 dp. Just need to make sure we import size. And now, the reason we can't see it, I believe, is just because it's too far stretched out. Let's see what happens if we do this. There we go. Now we can see it there. So we're going to change that and just fix it all up in styling. Let's make this a little bit bigger. We need to target the modifier correctly. There we go. Now, apparently that's up to date. I guess we'll see if it takes change in a sec. Let's go and resize our text in the section before. So I want to make the font size of the percentage a little bit larger. So let's go for 25 SP, and the font weight I'd like to be a lot bolder. Now that 71% pops a little bit more. And as for the text underneath, I'm just going to make it a bit smaller. Let's set it to a size of 10 SP. Cool. And now that you can see, it's no longer squishing the icon. The icon has changed its size to where we correctly set it earlier. It's just because that text was squishing a little bit. The same would happen if we just had to drop the width. It's effectively just how it's fitting in. Now, ideally, you wouldn't be setting the width intentionally like that. You just let it be dynamic. You can see it's a little bit neater. But for what we're going to do later, I do want a width here. So let's keep it at 160 for the time being. Awesome. So now for the next part, we can see that there's another tile that's very, very similar in design to the first tile. So if we really wanted to, we could go ahead and copy this whole box, because this is effectively a detailed tile, and we could effectively copy it and tweak the code where we need it to. Or alternatively, we could create a brand new composable that would run this as one of the functions that we can then use. And that's what I want to show you. This helps for just object-oriented coding and just for dynamic cards, if you want things to generate dynamically, and obviously you'll do calls and for loops for that. So let's create a detail tile. Awesome. Now, a thing to note is we have to, whenever we create a new composable and we want to style it the way we've been styling before, we want to pass in the same modifier that we set up at the first composable. This is just so that we don't have to rechange the way we've typed out the modifier in all of this. And then what we can do is we can actually grab this whole box, and inside the section we can throw it there. Now instantly we see there's a bit of a problem here. The drop image is not picking up anymore. And that's because we defined this value within the details screen function. So we can keep this here, that's not a problem, but we just have to set this up so that it can accept the dynamic input. And for that, we're going to want to classify a new variable, not value, this time variable, and let's call this icon image. Awesome. So this icon image is going to be passed in as we call the function, and we want to be passing in effectively this value that we set up here. So to put anything that we're going to pass in, we just go back to the actual function at the top, and we're just going to add in what we're going to want to insert here. So in this case, we're going to call it the icon image, and it'll be set to a string for now. And once we pass this, so we don't need this variable, once we pass this through, it will take in the dynamic image. So in this case, we will just say details image. Cool. The next thing that changes is the percentage and obviously the little description. So for that, we're also just going to add in percent value, and we're also just going to keep it as a string for now, so we can just pass in the actual number, not worry about the percent, and the same for the value info. That's just a little bit of text that comes underneath. Cool. It's always best practice to put the modifier at the bottom. So I'm just going to keep to that, just shift everything around. And then we want to effectively put this over here and this over here. Now we may come into a couple problems with the way the text renders because we've just put this value in here and it's not expecting it to be in inverted commas. So we're just going to type in text is equal to that so that when it renders and pass the value, it knows what goes where. Awesome. So this is required a paint. So this is what we're going to change from string to painter. And I believe we need to import that. Awesome. Cool. So now to test this out, we're just going to go into that same row where we wanted both those things. And we simply enough just call the function name like that. Now we're calling it and it will render, but there's an error. The error is pressing us because it wants these values before it will render, because it's missing information that it doesn't know what to render with unless we've set a default. You can set a default by like putting in a default here, but we can stay away from that from now and just know that it will continue to give us an error if you haven't given it information and there's no default available. Cool. So all we have to do is we write out the names of the things we need to put in. In this case, we've got the icon image, and it will be equal to the value we set over here for the droplet. Cool. The next thing we need is the percent value, and this one is equal to 12%. That's the other card, 12%. And the next thing we need is the value info, and in this case, it is technology advancement. So let's put in there technology advancement. Cool. And as you can see, the tile is now rendered. So what we want to do here is just change the icon to the little circuit board that we've got here, and then we can neaten up the rest of the style. What we can also do is create the other tile for this one and actually get rid of all of this code. So everything's looking a little clustered right now. Don't worry about that. We're just going to change these values to this. Now we can actually just remove this entire box, and here we've rendered in our things. This is now effectively the details tile. Awesome. Cool. The next thing we can do is add in the vector for that chip icon, and here I've just called it tech. Gonna add that in, becomes a drawable, and then we're just gonna create a new value and call this one tech chip, and we're gonna call it from here. Now we're gonna pass this name second one so that it renders the different icon. Cool, and there we go. We've got the tech chip over there. The size is a bit strange. Let's just see if it's not this that's stopping me from resizing it. Nope. Oh, it's to do with the size of this text that is squishing it. So let's go ahead and change that in our details tile. Let's go ahead and give slightly bigger width. And there we go, we can see the image resizes correctly. Let's just add a space between each of our tiles. Let's do that. We're just going to do another spacifier, a spacer with a modifier, not spacifier. Going to target the width, and we're going to give it a space of 10 dp. Awesome. Cool. Let's just bump up that size a little bit more again, or we could even entirely remove it and let it be dynamic. There we go. They're not identical in size anymore because of this text, so it's a little bit misaligned with this, but the fix for that would be to put in a hard width like we had earlier, and then either adding a spacer or just adjusting the size of the text. But that looks great for now. I think we're just going to move on to the next section. Cool, so now that we have our tiles, that takes care of this row, and underneath it, still in the column, let's create another one of those tiles. So, since we're going to be using a box with a similar color, I'm just going to grab it from here, and we can add that in, and now this is going to be the bottom tile. Cool. And now none of these things are dynamic anymore, so let's just add in some text here saying test. Test. We're going to change all of this now anyways. We can actually get rid of this image. Awesome. So now we have our block over here. For this one, we're going to go back and give it a width again. like we had before we changed that. And let's just give it a width of about 260 dp. That should, that's not nearly enough. Let's give it 360. And I think it's being limited by the padding. No, that's good at 360. Cool. Let's go ahead and just create another spacer. So we'll do that in between this row and this. That's where we wanted. Let's give it a modifier. That is of height. And let's keep it consistent at 10 dp. Awesome. That creates a little bit more space there. So the first text, we can replace this and we can say facts about Earth, just like it is in the wireframe. And underneath that, we are going to add in the 3 videos available. Awesome. Cool. Now that's starting to look a lot like the wireframe. Let's just maybe make this a little bit smaller, because that word is just a little bit overpowering as it is. And what we're going to do next is add in the little watch button. So this is a column on the left side. That's where those texts are. That's on top of each other. So to go outside of the column, we'll be back inside the row, which is inside the box. And we'll be able to do something on the side there. So for this, we're going to add in the button. Just going to hit tab to take the default button across. And we're going to add in the text that says watch. Cool, there we go, we've got our button. The only thing is the button color is not what we need it to be. So let's just add in a comma at the end of this functionality, and that's where we'll add in colors is equal to button defaults. Since we're using a default Android Studio button, we have to use these when changing the button color. So we'll say button colors, and inside here we can make it custom color 4. So we don't have this color yet. Let's go back over to our colors section, grab our wireframe, make another copy, and you know the drill by now. We're going to use the picker to grab that lovely shade of purple so that now once we import this, we can see that great purple. All that's left now is to add in a bit of space of width. Let's give it about 50 dp. And just like that, it's being squished a bit much. Let's drop it to about 40, see how that looks. That's a lot better. And there we go. We've recreated this interface. So I think the changes we can make, maybe if we just change up some of the padding and spacing between there, we can fine tune it to get it exactly how we want. But for the most part, we are done. Let's add in another spacer here. Give it about 20 dp, see how that looks. That's great. Maybe a little bit less at about 15. Cool. We want some space after all the text, which is currently at 10. Let's bump this up to 15 as well. Cool. and then in between we can get all of these to 15. They could probably do even a bit higher than 15, but doing this is going to space them all out quite nicely. And at the same time, we can also just make this a little bit wider. Cool. And I mean, for the most part, that's about it. That's how you would create your front end in Jetpack Compose. There's a couple of things that require a bit more research if you want to do some more functionality, like on buttons or state changes. But as far as UI goes, that's the gist of it. Thanks.